With 51 people killed during demonstrations in Cairo on Monday morning alone, and with the level of violence in Egypt erupting in the couple of years since Hosni Mubarak was ousted in February 2011, sexual crime in Egypt has also seen a disturbing increase, particularly during demonstrations. Some women have taken to disguising themselves as teenage boys to avoid sexual harassment and rape. I'm joined by journalist Nabila Ramdani, who's just back from Cairo. Nabila Ramdani, good morning.
Good morning.
Just how dangerous is it for women to go out and join in those popular protests?
Well, it is very dangerous indeed. I have been going to Egypt for quite a long time now, and especially covering the Arab Spring revolution 2 years ago, and renewed protests since the election of former President Mohammed Morsi. And women are particularly vulnerable during mass protests. It has to be said that the issue of sexual harassment and indeed sexual assault has always been an issue in Egyptian society, but it really comes to the fore, and it's even more cruel and more frequent during mass protests. And statistics, the late statistics testify to that. Over the last few days only, since the June the 30th demonstrations started, over 100 women have been seriously attacked by mobs or indeed thugs. And these attacks are particularly vicious. They go from forceful groping, for example, to instances of rapes, including rapes with sharp objects, which lead women to have to go through surgery. And another harrowing statistic highlighted by the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women said that 99.3% of Egyptian women have suffered some form of sexual harassment. So that's how serious the issue is in Egyptian society.
And in your view, are there people going out there deliberately with sexual intent and using the mass demonstrations as a cover for activities which they don't have the opportunity normally to indulge in?
Well, they make it abundantly clear that their target is a woman, no matter how old she is, whether she's young or she's old. And indeed, the perpetrators are themselves male perpetrators of these crimes are male of different ages as well and different backgrounds. And you'd be really astonished as to who gets involved in that kinds of vicious attacks. And the reason they put forward to, justify their actions effectively is that they do not like to see women protesting. They really want to keep them out of the political sphere. They do not condone the fact that, they might have a say in the future of the country as well, or that they would have grievances. And one of the most perhaps astonishing reactions came from radical Islamic preachers, one of them effectively saying that women have no shame and they want to be raped. That's a perennial theme in Egyptian society, which is essentially an arch-conservative and indeed patriarchal society, that women are blamed for the attacks that they are said to bring upon themselves. One member of the Egypt Upper House of Parliament also said that women contribute 100% to their rape because they put themselves in that position to be raped. So these are very alarming statements, and they are sending wrong messages.
To what extent is the way women dress a factor? I mean, if they dress in a Western fashion, are they more likely to be assaulted? Or even someone who's dressed more traditionally but protesting, are they equally a target?
Well, that's the argument that the perpetrators put forward to justify their action, that somehow women who imitate the mores of the West, dressed like Western pop singers or actresses, and not, very well covered, that they bring upon themselves those kind of attacks. But the reality is, no matter how you're dressed, you still are likely to be a victim of an attack of this sort, either harassment or more vicious attacks, whether you cover up I've seen women wearing burqas being attacked, women wearing hijabs being attacked. And indeed, in the case of the young women I cite in my article, a 22-year-old medical student called Randa who dresses up as a teenage boy, and that as well is not enough to ward off attackers.
Now, the kind of testimony given by women as to the techniques used by these people, it appears it tends not to be one individual who will do this, but multiple individuals together will use their weight of numbers to isolate a woman and assault her.
Well, absolutely, and that sums up the brutality of those actions, the number of men who actually join in those attacks. I think it took a Western media television reporter, Lara Logan, a South African CBS television reporter, to bring this issue to worldwide public attention when she was assaulted on the 11th of February 2011, on the very day that Hosni Mubarak was deposed, the former dictator. 300 men had attacked her at the same time, and she spent 4 days in hospital, and she spoke later about the trauma of these crimes. But speaking to Egyptian women who have gone through that, they also highlight the fact that men witnessing those attacks either join in en masse or stand by and do nothing about it. And that's also another frightening aspect.
There are men, though, who are prepared to fight against this and effectively try to protect women in places like Tahrir Square.
But, the saddest aspect in all that is that what women tell you is that no matter who was in charge of the country at any point, the issue of women and the violence against women and the abuse against women, it was never a priority on the political agenda. And it now takes women to administer perhaps not justice, but to ward off deterrence, effectively, to ward off attackers themselves, and they organize themselves in vigilante groups, such as groups called Tahrir Bodyguard, or another one called Operation Anti-Sexual Harassment. And it's a group of men and women fighting that kind of vicious attacks, and they often reply in kind to the attacks that are perpetrated on them. Men use sticks and indeed sometimes metal chains as well to abuse women, and that's the kind of summary deterrence that women are now resort to when they reply in kind, effectively.
Do women in any way hanker after what the agenda pursued by Suzanne Mubarak, for all the faults of the regime, and there were many? She, at least, as the wife of the former president, was an advocate for equality for women.
Well, indeed, and that's a very strange product of, under a dictatorship, and that's the agenda that was pursued by a number of first ladies in the Arab world, including Asma al-Assad in Syria, or indeed Ben Ali's wife in Tunisia. They were at the forefront in many ways of, the fight for women equality. Suzanne Mubarak in Egypt, the wife of the now deposed former dictator Hosni Mubarak, had a very pro-women agenda, including women's right to sue for divorce, and indeed she introduced a quota system favoring female election candidates. But the problem is that in a post-dictatorship Egypt, those progressive legislations are perceived as anti-religious and too liberal, and they are associated with a rejected dictatorship, and that's why they are unlikely to end up as a priority on the political agenda.
Finally, we talked about sexual crime against women and the increase in that. Generally speaking, the crime statistics in Egypt, how have they been since the departure of Mubarak? Because clearly there was a lot of fear that if you did commit crime and you were apprehended, that your fate could be fairly draconian under Mubarak. What has it been like since 2011?
Well, there has been a sharp rise in criminality since the former dictator Hosni Mubarak was forced out of power in February 2011. The crime rate has effectively quadrupled, and it's mainly due to a strange period of chaos, volatility, where people take advantage of that kind of unstable situation to go about and perpetrate all sorts of crimes, and that. That's one of the grievances that people had against President Morsi when they demonstrated a year on after he came to power. One of the things they blamed him for is his lack of ability to restore law and order and to allow crime to thrive effectively. But it has to be said that in a context where a crime is on the rise, women are particularly vulnerable.
Nabila Ramdani, just back from Cairo, thank you very much for talking to us.